But I think it went down a little bit deeper than that. People suddenly started turning to DEI and saying, it's bad, it's evil, it's discriminatory. And it's none of those things if you really understand it. Unfortunately, people start to focus on one or two elements of diversity, and generally it's going to be race and skin color. So they're looking at that and not recognizing when we really talk about diversity, there is so much more to it. There are so many facets to it that go well beyond just what you look like. It's where you were raised, the kind of work you do, with so many other things that enter into it.
What if I told you that DEI isn't dead, it's just been completely misunderstood, and that the real key to employee engagement isn't perks or paychecks, but inclusion? Today on Money Matters, we're joined by workplace culture experts Cornelia Gamlem and Barbara Mitchell, co-authors of Essentials of Employee Engagement, which is a new ebook out. And they also, both of you have been on the show multiple times before, so welcome back. We're glad to have you back. You both are here to challenge what you think you know about DEI and show how true engagement starts with making people feel heard, trusted, and connected to purpose. Whether you're struggling with retention, morale, or just trying to build a better team culture, this conversation is packed with strategies that you can use today. And stick around to the very end. Cornelia and Barbara share one powerful shift any leader can make this week to start re-engaging their team. You don't want to miss this one. Once again, Cornelia, Barbara, thank you so much for joining the show.
Glad to be back.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And again, I mentioned you guys are repeat guests here, and it's rare that we have people back multiple times, but I just love the space that you're working, the HR. We had you on for
the big book of HR.
I knew it was a big book of HR. I thought I was going to say HR Bible because it's something along those lines. And it was such a fantastic book, and it's good to have both of you back on to get updated in this space as things change. I know there's kind of a hybrid between people working remotely, people in the office, and we've talked about that in the past, but I love this topic. So let's just dive right into it. Let's start with the basics. What inspired you to write Essentials of Employee Engagement, and why now?
Well, we are so passionate about the topic of engaging employees in the workplace, and I think it often gets lost in so many of the conversations that people don't understand what it is. You mention engagement sometimes, and people think, oh, we've got to throw some parties and we've got to do what a colleague used to always call the feel-good stuff. And yeah, those are all nice to have kinds of things, but it goes much deeper than that, doesn't it, Barbara?
Absolutely. We want to really make people feel heard. We want to make them feel as if they are part of something that's bigger than they are, because we keep hearing this from employees. They want to be part of something. They don't just want to go to work and get paid. Yes, they want those things. They want to get paid, of course, and have benefits and all the good stuff. But what they really want is to be passionate about the work that they do. And we think that talking about engagement is one way to do that. Let people be heard and understood.
I love that. And I know we're working in different models now. There's people still working in the office and people working remotely or some kind of hybrid version of that. And it's real easy to get isolated and off by yourself and not feel like you're part of a bigger picture there. So let's talk about, now you've written extensively on HR and management in the past. How does employee engagement connect with your past work? Is this a natural evolution or a shift in the focus?
Oh, it's definitely part of the whole model that we've been working in a long time. But yes, I think it's a different twist to it, perhaps, is that we're talking about it as engaging employees, not just working with people. We want them to be just really, really focused on the work that they're doing and enjoying the work that they're doing. And wanting to, again, as I said a moment ago, wanting to be part of something that's bigger than they are. And I think if you focus on those kind of topics, it's a little bit different from just managing. It's managing in a perhaps a little bit different way. Cornelia, you've got some thoughts?
Yeah. The other thing that I would add to that is you mentioned that the workplace is changing. Well, the workforce is changing too, as New
Yes.
generations are coming into the workplace, and it's not for them. It's not the same model for the newer entrants. They were raised in a different time. They have different expectations than perhaps their boomer grandparents did, or even their Gen X parents did. And it's very, very important to them the type of an organization that they work for. They want to be committed to the organization itself, as well as the work that they're doing within the organization. So if they go to work for someplace and there's a lot of bad press around it, they're going to leave. They just don't want to be part of that because reputation is so, so very important to them.
What we find, we find too, Chris, is that people don't even join organizations if they don't feel committed to the organization. They do research, extensive research, before they actually make a commitment to join an organization. So as an employer, you may be missing out on big-time employee numbers just because you are not treating people well in the first place and engaging them in the work that they want to do. So it's even more basic than even joining the organization. They don't want to join it unless they can be part of something.
That makes a lot of sense to me. For us who've been in the work world for a very long time, we think about it as a shift, but there are people that are just now entering, so it's not a shift. In fact, they have these requirements for the types of organizations that they're even going to join, right? They may not even do you the courtesy of telling you that they didn't, that you just may not know. They go out and research and they just get taken out of the talent pool there. So you're decreasing the talent pool for sure. So let's talk about DEI, because that's this new ebook that we'll tell listeners later how they can get a copy of this and be able to read it. You make a strong case that inclusion is at the heart of employee engagement. Can you break that down for us and explain why DEI is often misunderstood in this context?
Absolutely. Inclusion is really making people feel like they count in an organization. And it's at the heart of an organization's culture, its practices, and most importantly, its values. So if you don't value people, you're off on the wrong track. And it's good that lack of value is going to trickle down throughout your organization, and not just with your employees, and I'll talk about that in a moment. There has been a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication around DEI, and I think a lot of it started a few years ago with that Supreme Court decision about affirmative action and college admissions. Well, I did a lot of work in affirmative action in the past. What goes on in an organization around affirmative action and what goes on in college admissions are two entirely different things. There was too much of a blending of that without separating it out and trying to understand it. But I think it went down a little bit deeper than that. People suddenly started turning to DEI and saying, it's bad, it's evil, it's discriminatory. And it's none of those things if you really understand it. Unfortunately, people start to focus on one or two elements of diversity, and generally it's going to be race and skin color. So they're looking at that and not recognizing when we really talk about diversity, there is so much more to it. There are so many facets to it that go well beyond just what you look like. It's where you were raised, the kind of work you do, with so many other things that enter into it. And organizations who have developed very sound DEI programs for the past decades understand that, and they recognize that, and they bring a lot of it in there. But there's been too much bad press about it's discriminatory, it's showing unfair advantage to people that have been traditionally in underrepresented groups. And that's really where the problem is because you start eliminating some of that. And then you're at the point of saying, well, I don't care about the barriers to opportunity. And that's really what equity has always been about. It's just making sure that everybody has the same opportunity, and different people need different things. But what can happen in your organization if you start removing some of this and this culture begins to emerge where people feel they can't speak out, as Barbara was saying earlier, they can't really be part of it, they're going to start to leave. And as they leave, you're going to have turnover, which has costs associated with it. As they leave, they're also going to take a lot of knowledge that they gained in your organization and bring it elsewhere. So from a competitive point of view, you're at a disadvantage. And you're also letting very good resources walk out the door. As we talked earlier, these are people that are passionate about it. But moving beyond what happens with employees, again, we're back to how do you value people? Do you really care about people and not just employees? Well, customers are going to start to look at that and say, well, you don't value what people bring to you, so why should I shop at your stores? And Target saw that. They had a big backlash when they started to retreat on their diversity initiatives. I think a number of lawsuits have come about from it, but I know that they had a lot of protests at many of their stores, and they saw a decline in sales. So it hit the bottom line. The other thing you have to be concerned about is investors, especially if you're a small company, maybe you don't have that same issue. But for a larger company that's publicly traded, investors are going to start to say, why should I put my money in your organization? And Costco had a situation a few months back that's almost the opposite of Target. There was some activists that went to the board and said, you've got to scale back your DEI activities. And the board said no. And they got pushback and they would not do it. And what happened? Their sales and revenue went up over the same period for another year. So people are watching this.
Yeah.
But investors are looking at it, customers are looking at it. So it goes well, and it also gets you back to engagement, because it may not be employee engagement, but how are you engaging your customers? How are you engaging the community that's around you if you're really not valuing people? Because your customers are people, your investors are people, just as your employees are people.
I was just going to say, Chris, one of the things that we talk a lot about is that organizations are smart enough to finally, I think, realize they cannot do their jobs. They cannot open their doors. They cannot be a company without qualified employees. And it's just that simple. I mean, how many times do I say that in a day, Cornelia?
Right.
It's just simple. If you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter what you do. And so having the right people, that's where it all starts. And then how do you treat them? How do you bring them into your organization? How do you maximize their abilities to do their jobs and make the contributions that they can make to the organization?
I love it. Yeah, it's a very strong argument that you're making here. And when I hear this is the way I look at it. For me, DEI is like, this is a good thing, right? But there were some critical aspects of it that, frankly, right now, plain language, we're having to justify some stuff that was really healthy for companies. People are having to kind of dig into it to explain. And so what I hear in this argument is something that if we were talking to the CFO or somebody is, how do we put dollar signs to this? As a business person, when you say things turnover and giving your employees over to the competition, losing resources because you're not willing to have this discussion because you've taken these small aspects of something and thrown it out. I love this reframe of the topic and saying, nope, we can't do this. We have to go back and look at it from a bigger picture. And what are we really losing by doing that? The company that you used as an example that said, hey, we're going to keep our DEI policies, that shouldn't be a radical act. And yet we are at a point where we're having to go back and say that. So, but I love how this is really breaking it into the concepts that somebody, a CFO, would look at and say, wait, maybe we do need to let's pivot a little bit and talk about engagement. What are some of the most common misconceptions that leaders have about engagement? Where do organizations tend to get it wrong?
I think they get it wrong from the very beginning in most cases, where they just don't feel where their employees add value to the organization. And so then the organization, and I can pick on the CFOs for a second because they're the ones that usually are visible, and they're saying no. They don't want to spend money on employee development. Well, what a big mistake that is. Employees want and they need to be developed, and that costs money. And so if you don't develop your employees, again, Cornelia already gave you a good response to, if you don't develop your employees, they leave. They're not going to stay, especially employees today in the younger generations. They don't hang around to see what you're going to do for them, maybe in a couple of years. They want it, and they want it now. And so development is a huge part of what an employer needs to do, and especially the CFO needs to give you some dollars to spend to make sure that and it doesn't have to be lots and lots of money. There's lots of ways to give people development and things, recognition, that I think is another one that we talk a lot about. It's a really important thing to recognize your employees. And of course, the most important way for recognizing employees is to just say thank you. And does that cost any money? Nope, it doesn't.
The other thing around development, as Barbara pointed out, there's a lot of ways you can do it without spending a lot of money. But if you put some resources in developing your employees and they're allowed to advance in the organization, it's a lot easier to move somebody internal into a new slot, especially the higher up you go in the organization, than it is to recruit from the outside. And I think a lot of times they miss that point because you're looking at the here and now, and you're not looking at even 2 years down the road. What kind of a contribution can they be making if they've been able to develop some new skills and competencies along the way?
This idea of development, the simple fact that if people don't feel engaged or that their growth and development is being addressed, that they'll just leave. So again, for the CFO, when we think dollar signs, you mentioned it doesn't take a lot. I think of I have an example where there was an employee who had been there many years. She got a certification. The company was trying to increase their LinkedIn presence, actually, and they put on LinkedIn, congratulations, this person for getting your certification. And the CFO or the CEO of the company said, congratulations to that person. And she had not talked to the CEO like ever. And it was one of the happiest moments for her to see that. And it literally didn't cost them a dime other than just putting it out there. So I love that. I love that. So this makes a lot of sense to me. How do you define a fully engaged employee? What does that look like in practice, not just theory?
I would say, first of all, it's somebody that knows that they can bring an idea forward and they're going to be listened to, whether the organization has the resources to act on the idea or not. And even if this isn't the right time, say, to implement whatever they're suggesting, they're going to feel like, okay, they gave me good feedback on that. I know I can bring other ideas forward, so I'm going to keep working and giving this organization my best. And I think that's really where engagement gets down to. People that feel committed and they feel that they want to do everything they can to help the organization to succeed. They don't look to it and say that's the manager or the director's job. It's like, I want to do my part. And it may just be a small part, but if you have a whole team of people that are engaged and are all doing their best to bring their part along, just think how dynamic that can be, not just for the team, but for the organization as well.
There's kind of a simple way to look at the whole idea of engagement that I think of, and that is you want to make connections. You want your employees to connect with the work that they do, with their manager, to connect with their manager, to connect with their coworkers, and to connect with the outcomes that the company is looking for. What does success look like for that organization? And if you can engage your employees on those four things, and get them excited about the work that they're doing, you'll have an engaged employee. You may not have an engaged workforce because sometimes it doesn't translate that everybody feels the same level of engagement. But we think that there are ways that you can maximize to the level that which you can for your organization to make sure that people feel connected and engaged. And I'll use another adjective here, and that is excited. You want people to feel a level of excitement, that a pride that they work for a really great organization and that they're enjoying the work that they're doing. We talk a lot about in the work that we do, we talk about the word fun. And fun doesn't usually equate for many managers, it doesn't equate to, this is a business, of course, we don't have fun here, this is work. If people are having a little bit of fun along the way, it's amazing what can happen to engagement if they're enjoying the work that they're doing and they feel committed.
Cornelia started with the idea of the employee feeling comfortable sharing their thoughts and their ideas. And I kind of juxtapose like a bad leader, somebody who's just a bully who shoots people down. You don't feel like you can bring this good idea to the table, right? So the idea of people being engaged and at that very basic level, giving you their best work, you have some of the strongest resources available right there in the company. And Cornelia also made the point that it's much easier to put somebody existing into a different role than it is to go out and start from scratch and find somebody from outside. So all of this stuff builds on top of it. Barbara mentioned 2 words, excited and fun. So I'm thinking back to the bully leader or the CFO or somebody who's that's not necessarily the first thing that they think about, but how that pays in dividends with getting your employees engaged and how you can literally say crowdsource or employee source, right? Some of your best resources right there internally in-house. So I love that. In your view, what role does leadership play in driving or destroying engagement? Are there simple actions managers can take today to improve team connection?
Start with listening. And we talk a lot about listening to people, and Barbara always makes the point, and I've echoed it over and over again. In school, we're taught a lot about how to write good business writing. We're taught how to make presentations, how to give speeches. We're never taught anything about how to be a good listener. And so many people don't know how to do that. They think listening is, oh, I'm in this meeting and they're making notes because this is what I want to say next. And they haven't heard anything that anybody else has said in the meeting.
I love that idea. Start with listening. That's a huge one there. And it is one of those things that kind of gets left off of the list of skills. Teaches you how to write a good email, good business letter, but you think back to, did we learn that in school? And so super important as leaders to know that is one of the very first things that you can do to be connected to the team. Now you've consulted with organizations of all different sizes. Can you share an example of a company that's turned around engagement and what lessons others can take from it?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Trying to think back on so many of them. I know there was one company that I worked with that they had a leader who, in the middle of a transition, they had done an acquisition of a new company. And he was making a point of going, when he go visit this new site, learning everybody's name. And he had a methodology that he did that by. So when he went out there and he would walk around and see people working, and he didn't just confine himself to the C-suite, to the leadership that was in this new company. He walked around and talked to everybody. And I think that went a long way in the whole transition process, because people, they suddenly felt like we're not being taken over. We're being brought in to a new organization. And he really talked to his team at the corporate office about listening to them, bringing in some of their ideas and trying to incorporate them into different parts of the organization. And I think that went a long way for their success. I mean, he was very respected.
I think that's a great example. I think the larger these enterprise size companies, the larger that the companies just keep getting bigger and bigger. The idea of management by walking around and speaking individually and learning people's name is super duper strong and good examples there. We are bumping towards the end of the show. We've got just about 4 minutes. Let's see. I want to ask y'all, if a leader is listening right now and realizes their team might be disengaged, what's the very first step you'd recommend they take?
Listening would be the first thing I would do. Cornelia just already talked about that. I would make sure that, people talk about doing a listening tour or just asking people, how are things going? Some one-on-one kind of thing. Try to get to where it is that, where are you falling short? But listening would be the most important piece of it. And the second part, I think, would be if you know your organization or some people are not performing or not engaged, I would look to the coaching model. If you have coaches or you can get coaches, that one-on-one where you can sit down with an employee and talk about what it is that they need in order to do their job and get them excited about what it is, how they can contribute. That one-on-one, and that goes back to what Cornelia just said about the example that she gave. There's something quite magical about talking to a human being in our world. We all know that we've got AI ahead of us or that we're in the middle of it or whatever. But I really do believe that being able to communicate one-on-one makes a huge, huge difference if you can.
That's a great answer there. You started with listening, and then we also talked about coaching, the idea of individual one-on-one human interaction, right? So we get further down this rabbit hole with AI and everything, that human interaction is going to be very, very important there. So we are literally right here at the end of the show. Cornelia, Barbara, what have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
Know how precious your employees are. And especially as we're walking into this age of AI, I think we're going to start to see a lot of thoughts around people are dispensable, they're interchangeable, and you cannot have an organization that's running on robots and artificial intelligence.
Barbara, closing thoughts as we end here?
I would echo Cornelia's comment about it's caring for your employees, letting them know that they really do matter and that they are human beings. They're not just your employees. They are human beings with thoughts and ideas and lives, and acknowledging that they are human beings and that you trust them and you give them trust right back.
What a great thought to leave today on. Now, for listeners who want to get a copy of the ebook, it's available through Amazon. What is the title of the ebook for them to find it?
Essentials of Employee Engagement.
Okay, Essentials of Employee Engagement. And I know while they're there, they'll see other books that you published, right? As they go through Amazon.
Yes.
Is there a website if people want to get in contact with you to talk more about this? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, we do have a website, bigbookofhr.com.
Mm-hmm.
Both Barbara and I are also on LinkedIn, and we're both very active on LinkedIn. That's where we do the majority of our social media. So either through the website or directly through LinkedIn, where we love to meet new people. We love to engage with listeners of other shows as well. So
I love it. Well, go find Barbara and Cornelia out on LinkedIn. Get a copy of the ebook through Amazon. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Chris.